Imagine standing on the battlefields of the Second World War, the earth trembling beneath the roar of tanks and artillery, the sky darkened by swarms of aircraft, each carrying weapons designed not only to kill, but to instill fear and dominate entire nations. The scale of destruction was unprecedented, and the ingenuity behind the weapons developed during this period reflects both human brilliance and the horrors of war. From the early days of the conflict to the climactic battles that decided the fate of nations, every weapon carried a story of innovation, strategy, and devastating power. As we journey through the deadliest weapons of World War II, we uncover the technological marvels, tactical strategies, and the raw force that shaped the modern battlefield. At the heart of the conflict, tanks became the kings of land warfare, and among them, a few stood above all others. The German Tiger I tank, introduced in 1942, was a mechanical nightmare for the Allies. Equipped with an 88mm gun, it could destroy virtually any Allied tank from hundreds of meters away. Its thick armor made it almost impervious to conventional artillery, and its sheer size and intimidating presence turned it into a psychological weapon as much as a physical one. The Tiger tank was not just a machine of war, it was a symbol of engineering excellence and strategic terror. Every encounter with it on the battlefield required meticulous planning, coordination, and often overwhelming numbers to neutralize it. The Tiger's presence forced Allied commanders to rethink strategies, invest in new tank designs, and develop specialized tactics to survive its firepower. While the Tiger dominated the land, the skies were equally terrifying battlegrounds. The Messerschmitt Bf 109, the backbone of the Luftwaffe, was a versatile and deadly fighter aircraft. Its speed, agility, and powerful weaponry allowed German pilots to control the airspace over Europe for significant portions of the war. On the other hand, the Supermarine Spitfire and the P-51 Mustang emerged as the Allied response, embodying innovation, adaptability, and resilience. The Spitfire's superior maneuverability in the Battle of Britain thwarted the Luftwaffe's dominance, while the P-51 Mustang, with its extended range and Merlin engine, became a long-range escort capable of protecting bombers deep into enemy territory. These aircraft were not merely machines. They were extensions of human courage, skill, and determination, each engagement in the sky a deadly chess match that could determine the outcome of entire campaigns. Naval warfare also witnessed revolutionary developments. The German U-boat, a stealth predator of the Atlantic, terrorized Allied shipping lanes, sinking thousands of tons of vital supplies and war material. The U-boat campaign highlighted the deadly combination of stealth, strategy, and technological innovation. Allied navies responded with convoys, sonar technology, depth charges, and long-range aircraft patrols, engaging in a relentless game of cat and mouse that spanned the Atlantic Ocean. In the Pacific, the conflict between aircraft carriers, battleships, and submarines redefined naval engagements. The attack on Pearl Harbor demonstrated the devastating potential of aircraft-launched munitions, while the Battle of Midway showcased intelligence, strategy, and timing as weapons as lethal as any torpedo or cannon shell. Artillery remained a cornerstone of ground combat, with some of the most feared pieces being the German 88mm flak guns. Originally designed as anti-aircraft weapons, they proved devastating against tanks and infantry alike. Their versatility, range, and rate of fire made them a cornerstone of German defensive and offensive strategies. Across the Soviet front, massive artillery barrages shaped battles in ways that were both psychologically and physically overwhelming. The scale of artillery used on both sides reflected not only the intensity of the conflict, but also the industrial capacity and strategic priorities of the nations involved. Each shell, each calculated strike, had the power to alter the course of engagements, destroy fortifications, and claim lives on an unimaginable scale. The technological advancements of World War II were not limited to conventional weapons. Rockets, jet engines, and experimental weaponry heralded a new era of warfare. The V-1 and V-2 rockets of Nazi Germany, precursors to modern ballistic missiles, represented a leap in destructive capability. The V-2, in particular, was the world's first long-range guided ballistic missile, capable of striking cities with little warning and causing mass casualties. These weapons were terrifying not just for their physical impact, but for the psychological effect they had on civilian populations, representing a new form of total war where the front lines extended into the heart of cities and homes. The Allied response, though limited at first, involved intensive research, countermeasures, and eventually the development of technologies that would define post-war military innovation. Small arms, though seemingly simple compared to tanks, aircraft, and rockets, played a decisive role in the outcomes of countless engagements. The M1 Garand rifle, widely used by American soldiers, offered reliability, rapid fire capability, and accuracy that gave infantry a significant advantage. The German MG-42, famously known as Hitler's buzzsaw, had an astonishing rate of fire, capable of unleashing terror on advancing troops. The balance between firepower, mobility, and training often determined the success or failure of entire units, illustrating that in warfare, even small-scale innovations could have large-scale consequences. Every weapon carried lessons in ergonomics, human psychology, and battlefield efficiency, showing that technology and human skill were inseparable in the deadly dance of war. Chemical and experimental weapons, while not deployed on the large scale in Europe, added a layer of potential fear to the conflict. Nations explored toxic gases, incendiaries, and flamethrowers to break stalemates and create shock among enemy troops. Flamethrowers, for example, were particularly feared in trench and bunker warfare, turning fortified positions into deadly traps. These weapons reflected the extremes to which nations would go in pursuit of victory, pushing moral boundaries while testing the limits of human endurance and ingenuity. Their existence, even if rarely deployed, shaped tactical decisions and instilled caution and fear on every battlefield. As World War II progressed, the integration of intelligence, technology, and raw firepower became increasingly sophisticated. The British codebreakers at Bletchley Park, deciphering the Enigma code, demonstrated that information could be as lethal as a tank shell or a fighter aircraft. Signals intelligence, espionage, and reconnaissance allowed commanders to anticipate enemy movements, allocate resources efficiently, and exploit weaknesses with precision. Every weapon, from the smallest rifle to the most advanced rocket, gained amplified effect when guided by accurate intelligence. The combination of technology and strategy created a complex tapestry of warfare where knowledge, speed, and precision could outweigh sheer numbers. By the mid-war period, the global arms race had reached unprecedented levels. Factories churned out tanks, planes, ships, and ammunition at a scale never seen before. The Soviet T-34, with its balance of speed, armor, and firepower, became a symbol of mass-produced efficiency. The American B-17 Flying Fortress embodied the philosophy of strategic bombing, emphasizing durability, defensive armament, and payload capacity. Each weapon reflected the industrial might, strategic thinking, and tactical philosophy of its nation, turning the global conflict into both a human and technological struggle. Soldiers, sailors, and airmen alike depended on their weapons, not just for survival, but for the execution of broader strategic objectives that would ultimately shape the post-war world. In conclusion, the deadliest weapons of World War II were more than instruments of destruction. They were reflections of human ingenuity, ambition, and the terrifying consequences of global conflict. Tanks, aircraft, naval vessels, artillery, rockets, small arms, and experimental technologies combined to create a battlefield of unprecedented scale and complexity. The stories behind these weapons reveal lessons in strategy, engineering, psychology, and human endurance. They demonstrate how the pursuit of technological superiority can drive innovation, change the course of battles, and leave a lasting impact on history. As we continue to explore these instruments of war, we gain insight not only into the mechanics of destruction, but also into the resilience, bravery, and determination of the men and women who wielded them, shaping the destiny of nations and the world itself. As the Second World War progressed into its middle years, the development and deployment of weapons escalated at an unprecedented pace. The battlefield was no longer just a simple contest of manpower. It had transformed into a contest of engineering, innovation, and strategy, where the edge often lay with those who could integrate technology into tactics most effectively. From armored divisions to air forces, naval fleets, and experimental programs, every nation involved in the conflict sought to create weapons capable of not only defeating enemies, but also altering the very nature of warfare. The lessons learned from early confrontations shaped the design, deployment, and employment of some of the most advanced and deadly weapons of the era. Among land weapons, the evolution of tank warfare reached astonishing heights. While the German Tiger I had already become a formidable force, the Germans soon introduced the Tiger II, also known as the King Tiger. This behemoth carried an 88mm KW-43 gun, capable of destroying virtually any Allied armor from extreme distances. Its sloped frontal armor made it nearly impervious to most anti-tank weapons of the time, forcing Allied forces to innovate rapidly in response. The sheer weight of the King Tiger limited mobility in some terrains, but in open battlefields, it remained virtually unstoppable. Simultaneously, the Soviets had developed the IS to heavy tank, designed specifically to counter the Tiger and Panther tanks. Armed with a 122mm gun, the IS combined heavy armor with the firepower needed to challenge German dominance on the Eastern Front. The tank battles in Kursk, the largest tank confrontation in history, showcased these designs in full force, illustrating how engineering and strategic planning determine the outcomes of entire operations. Infantry support weapons also evolved dramatically. The German Sturmgewehr 44, often considered the world's first assault rifle, revolutionized infantry combat. It provided soldiers with both the range of a rifle and the rapid-fire capability of a submachine gun, bridging the gap between traditional rifles and fully automatic weapons. The M1 carbine and Thompson submachine gun in the hands of American soldiers offered comparable versatility and lethality in various combat environments, from urban warfare to open fields. These small arms, often overshadowed by tanks and aircraft in popular imagination, were critical in shaping the outcomes of skirmishes, ambushes, and urban engagements. Their design reflected careful attention to ergonomics, ammunition efficiency, and battlefield adaptability. Air power continued to evolve with remarkable intensity. Jet propulsion introduced a new era in aerial combat, with the Messerschmitt Me 262 becoming the world's first operational jet fighter. This aircraft could outpace any Allied piston-engine fighter, giving German pilots a temporary but potent advantage in the air. Though deployed late in the war, the Me 262 demonstrated the potential of jet technology and foreshadowed the future of aerial combat. Allied forces responded not only with conventional aircraft, but also with innovative escort tactics, long-range fighters, and precision bombing campaigns. The strategic bombing efforts over Germany, utilizing B-17 flying fortresses and later B-29 superfortresses in the Pacific, emphasized high-altitude precision, defensive armament, and the psychological impact of sustained aerial bombardment on enemy morale. Naval innovations were equally significant. Aircraft carriers replaced battleships as the primary instruments of maritime dominance. The Battle of the Coral Sea and the Battle of Midway demonstrated the decisive role of carrier-based aviation. Carrier-launched aircraft could strike with speed and surprise, often determining the outcome of naval engagements without the ships ever coming into direct line of fire. Submarines, particularly the German U-boats, continued to threaten supply lines, forcing the Allies to develop advanced sonar systems, depth charges, and escort carrier tactics. The evolution of sonar, radar, and cryptography combined to create a complex network of detection and counter-detection measures that became as crucial as the weapons themselves. Strategic intelligence, now intertwined with weaponry, to dictate the ebb and flow of battles across oceans and continents. Rocket and missile technology expanded beyond the V1 and V2 programs, signaling a paradigm shift in long-range weaponry. The V2 rocket, in particular, was not only the world's first long-range guided missile, but also a demonstration of how engineering could bypass traditional defenses. Cities such as London experienced strikes with no warning, illustrating the psychological as well as physical impact of these weapons. The Allied forces, recognizing the threat, accelerated research into countermeasures, including intelligence operations aimed at discovering launch sites and preemptive strikes on production facilities. Meanwhile, experimental programs in both the United States and Germany explored the potential of guided bombs, jet-assisted artillery, and even early rocketry aimed at developing tactical and strategic advantages for future conflicts. Chemical weapons, though largely restricted by treaties and fear of reciprocal attacks, continued to be explored and prepared for potential use. Flamethrowers were deployed extensively in both European and Pacific theaters, particularly effective against bunkers, pillboxes, and fortified positions. The psychological impact of these weapons was profound. Soldiers often faced paralyzing fear at the sight or sound of flame-based attacks, and commanders had to account for morale as much as physical threat when planning operations. Additionally, incendiary bombs deployed from aircraft were designed to destroy industrial centers, military infrastructure, and urban populations, demonstrating that technological ingenuity extended beyond purely offensive or defensive arms to include total war strategies targeting both military and civilian resources. Naval artillery continued to evolve with precision, caliber, and range. The Yamato-class battleships of Japan carried some of the largest naval guns ever mounted on a warship, capable of firing shells weighing over 1,400 kilograms. These weapons were engineered not only to inflict catastrophic damage on enemy vessels, but also to serve as strategic deterrents in the Pacific theater. Meanwhile, American naval forces focused on combined arms tactics, integrating carrier strikes, battleship bombardments, and submarine operations to maintain maritime superiority. The interplay of shipboard weapons, long-range artillery, and aerial support created a dynamic environment where naval engagements were determined as much by planning and coordination as by raw firepower. Anti-tank and anti-aircraft weapons became increasingly specialized. The German 88mm gun evolved into a dual-purpose weapon, effective both against armored vehicles and high-flying aircraft. The Allied response included the development of tank destroyers, self-propelled artillery, and mobile anti-aircraft units. These adaptations reflect a constant cycle of innovation, countermeasure, and tactical adjustment that defined the mid-war years. Every technological leap on one side prompted an immediate response on the other, illustrating the relentless pace of military evolution, driven by necessity and ingenuity. By the latter half of the war, combined arms operations had become the standard for successful campaigns. Tanks, infantry, artillery, aircraft, and intelligence worked in unison to achieve objectives that would have been impossible with isolated units. The integration of weapons into coordinated strategies marked a significant evolution from earlier conflicts, where single branches of the military often dominated operations. In cities, forests, deserts, and mountains, these combined arms tactics demonstrated the importance of synchronization, timing, and resource allocation in achieving victory. Weapons were only as effective as the humans who operated them, and training, discipline, and innovation became as decisive as firepower itself. The industrial capacity of nations became a battlefield in its own right. Factories, production lines, and supply chains determine the quantity, quality, and availability of weapons. The Soviet T-34 exemplified mass production efficiency, providing large numbers of effective medium tanks that could be deployed quickly and in overwhelming numbers. American factories produced thousands of Sherman tanks, B-17 bombers, and small arms, ensuring sustained pressure on enemy forces. Germany, despite technical superiority in some weapons, often struggled with production constraints, highlighting that in modern warfare, industrial logistics were as critical as battlefield performance. Every weapon fielded reflected not just design excellence, but also the broader economic and organizational capability of its nation. In conclusion, the middle years of World War II saw a remarkable escalation in weapon technology, tactical sophistication, and strategic integration. From tanks like the Tiger II and IS-2 revolutionary firearms, advanced aircraft, devastating rockets, and naval behemoths, the war demonstrated the deadly potential of innovation when combined with strategic foresight. Every engagement, whether on land, sea, or air, was a complex interplay of technology, human skill, and tactical planning. The lessons learned during this period shaped not only the outcome of the war, but also the future of military science, influencing conflicts and defense strategies for decades to come. As we continue to explore the most dangerous weapons of World War II, it becomes clear that these innovations were not merely instruments of destruction, but also reflections of human ingenuity, resourcefulness, and the relentless pursuit of strategic advantage. As World War II approached its final years, the sheer scale of weaponry and the relentless pursuit of technological superiority became defining features of the conflict. The deadliest weapons, whether on land, in the air, or at sea, had not only reshaped battlefields, but had also left indelible marks on strategy, military doctrine, and the collective psychology of those who lived through the war. Each weapon carried with it stories of innovation, courage, and destruction, illustrating how human ingenuity could be channeled toward both creation and annihilation. The interplay between technology, strategy, and human resilience formed a narrative as compelling as any personal story of heroism or tragedy on the front lines. On the Eastern Front, the continued use of tanks, such as the Soviet T-34 and the German Panther and Tiger II, underscored the importance of mobility, armor, and firepower. Tank engagements became intricate tests of tactical awareness, logistics, and crew training. The Soviets, leveraging their mass production capabilities, could field large numbers of T-34s, compensating for individual technical inferiority with overwhelming numerical strength. German crews, on the other hand, relied on precision, superior optics, and the long-range firepower of their heavier tanks to dominate individual engagements. These encounters highlighted the evolving nature of armored warfare, where the combination of human skill, coordination, and machine performance dictated the outcome of battles. The lessons learned from these tank confrontations would inform post-war armored doctrine for decades, emphasizing flexibility, speed, and integration with combined arms tactics. Aircraft continued to define the outcome of campaigns in both Europe and the Pacific. By the final years of the war, the introduction of long-range bombers, advanced fighters, and experimental jet aircraft had transformed aerial combat into a strategic art form. The Allied strategic bombing campaign over Germany, utilizing aircraft such as the B-17 and B-24, combined precision targeting with overwhelming numbers to disrupt industrial production and weaken civilian morale. In the Pacific, aircraft carriers and their embarked squadrons became decisive instruments of power projection, with engagements like the Battle of Leyte Gulf demonstrating the tactical and strategic potential of coordinated naval aviation. The psychological impact of air superiority was immense. Cities and troops alike lived under constant threat, shaping both military planning and civilian resilience. Naval warfare in the closing years of World War II illustrated the integration of technology and strategy at a global scale. Submarines, once terrifying predators of the Atlantic, faced increasingly sophisticated detection and countermeasure systems. Allied convoys, equipped with sonar, depth charges, and coordinated air support, gradually neutralized the U-boat threat, demonstrating the evolving balance between offense and defense. In the Pacific, battleship artillery, amphibious assaults, and carrier-based operations coalesced into massive coordinated efforts, highlighting the complexity and scale of modern naval operations. Each engagement tested the limits of human endurance, the effectiveness of weapon systems, and the ability of commanders to synthesize intelligence, logistics, and firepower into cohesive operational plans. Small arms, though seemingly simple compared to tanks and aircraft, continued to influence the outcomes of countless skirmishes. The reliability and firepower of the M1 Garand, Thompson's submachine guns, and Sturmgewehr 44 played decisive roles in infantry engagements. Soldiers trained extensively with these weapons, understanding that precision, discipline, and tactical employment could outweigh numerical disadvantage or technical inferiority. Every rifle, machine gun, or submachine gun represented a convergence of ergonomic design, ammunition efficiency, and battlefield adaptability, underscoring the critical role of individual soldiers within the broader machinery of war. Rockets and guided missiles, pioneered by programs such as the German V2, foreshadowed the post-war era of long-range strategic weaponry. These innovations were not only destructive in nature, but also psychologically transformative, introducing civilians to the concept of attacks that could arrive with little warning and no immediate defense. The psychological dimension of these weapons, fear, uncertainty, and the constant threat of sudden devastation demonstrated that the impact of technology extended far beyond physical destruction. Both Axis and Allied nations recognized the value of research, experimentation, and intelligence in harnessing these technologies effectively, laying the groundwork for the Cold War arms race. Chemical and incendiary weapons, while not widely deployed in Europe, influenced planning and tactics on multiple fronts. Flamethrowers, incendiary bombs, and specialized munitions were employed in both urban and rural engagements, forcing defenders to adapt and instilling fear that could shape battlefield decisions. The strategic use of these weapons reflected a broader understanding of human psychology, demonstrating that victory depended as much on shaping enemy behavior as on inflicting casualties. Commanders considered the threat, deployment, and countermeasures of such weapons, integrating them into broader operational planning that balanced efficacy with the moral and practical implications of their use. The integration of intelligence, cryptography, and reconnaissance remained a decisive factor in the effectiveness of weapon systems. The breaking of the Enigma code by British cryptographers at Bletchley Park, coupled with sophisticated aerial reconnaissance and signal interception, allowed Allied forces to anticipate German movements, disrupt operations, and target critical assets with precision. Knowledge of enemy capabilities, positions, and intentions amplified the effectiveness of every weapon deployed, demonstrating that information could be as decisive as firepower. This synergy of intelligence and technology exemplified the modern principles of warfare, where awareness and adaptability could change the outcome of campaigns. Industrial capacity and logistical efficiency were critical determinants of wartime success. The United States, leveraging its vast industrial base, produced thousands of tanks, aircraft, ships, and weapons systems, ensuring sustained operational capability across multiple theaters. The Soviet Union utilized mass production to field large numbers of effective tanks and artillery, while Germany often struggled to maintain sufficient quantities of its technically advanced but resource-intensive weaponry. The relationship between industrial output, strategic planning, and battlefield deployment highlighted that technology alone was insufficient. It required the infrastructure, manpower, and organizational discipline to translate innovation into sustained military effectiveness. As World War II drew to a close, the legacy of its deadliest weapons became apparent. Tanks, aircraft, artillery, rockets, and firearms had reshaped not only the methods of combat, but also the principles of military strategy and national defense. The psychological impact of these weapons, fear, intimidation, and respect persisted long after the cessation of hostilities, influencing both the mindset of post-war generations and the development of international military doctrine. The technological innovations pioneered during the conflict laid the foundation for modern armored vehicles, jet aircraft, missiles, and small arms, illustrating the enduring influence of the war on subsequent military thought and engineering. In reflecting on the deadliest weapons of World War II, it becomes clear that their significance extends beyond the battlefield. They were instruments of strategy, tools of psychological warfare, and symbols of national ambition. They required human skill, courage, and ingenuity to operate, and their effectiveness was amplified by coordination, intelligence, and tactical foresight. Every tank, plane, gun, and missile tells a story of innovation and adaptation, revealing the interplay between technology and human agency in shaping the course of history. The lessons of these weapons continue to inform contemporary military thinking, illustrating the enduring consequences of conflict and the relentless drive of nations to achieve technological and strategic superiority. If you enjoyed this historical journey and want more deep, documentary-style World War II stories, make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and comment your next requested topic below.